will, with liberty and justice for all.
Here.
Okay. The only item we have for discussion is the
Microphone?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. The only item we have for discussion is the collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees. Sorry, wrong one. Presentation analysis and findings for the purpose of discussing dispatch services for the village of Wauconda. And Doug, I believe you have this presentation.
I do, thank you. Everybody can hear me all right? Yep. All the way back there? I am not particularly good at speaking into a microphone, so if I get animated and my arms start flying away and you can't hear me anymore, somebody yell up and remind me that I'm speaking into a microphone. So, anyway, let me start by just thanking you for being in attendance tonight. This is a very emotional topic for all of us. I just appreciate your effort in being here and in trying to hear what we have to say. My job is occasionally a little bit difficult. I'm not paid to make the easy decision. I try to take all of the facts and the data into consideration, and I try to make some kind of rational decision outside of the emotional realm. That's what I'm trying to do in this particular situation, is to focus on a rational decision-making model based on data and numbers and performance and quality, and move forward with that decision or that recommendation to the board, and we'll take it from there. So let me recognize the impact of this discussion on the dispatchers. It's not easy for them to be sitting here hearing a discussion about their livelihoods and the impact on them and their families. And I have been displaced. It's not an easy choice. It's not an easy circumstance to incorporate into your daily life and to go home and tell your families there's going to be some changes. It's difficult for people on both sides of the table, and I don't want to make light of that. So we're doing the best we can. We hope that you trust us, that we're trying to give you an impartial view of our methodology and what we're trying to accomplish by doing this. So I'm here tonight. I'm going to try to give you my best shot at a truthful explanation of how we got where we are, what my recommendation might be, what the work is that we have left to do, and then we'll take it from there. So this presentation, I just want to elaborate that this is not a ploy to try to get concessions out of the union. This is an actual methodology that we've looked at to consider an outsourcing option that we think has the potential to save us a significant amount of money that we can use for other vital services for the community. It doesn't make it any easier to hear the message, but we're not using that as a bargaining tool or a bargaining chip. So a couple of my friends from the FOP are here. Pete Balderas, who represents this union, Kevin Krug from the FOP. Kevin and I go way back. I think we've established I hope we've established a level of trust with one another. I've always been appreciative of Kevin's ability to be forthright and truthful with me. Pete, we're just getting to know. Hopefully we can build that relationship moving forward. So thank you for being here and appreciate that. So, all right, so our agenda for tonight. First of all, we're going to try to review why we're examining outsource as an option. What kind of financial pressures that we are predicting that we will experience, and why this is a response to that pressure, perceived pressure. We're going to go through and talk about where we've been in this evaluation, the timeline. We're going to take a quick foray into a very technical document from the Emergency Telephone Safety Board. They have a report that was issued this past summer on consolidation of dispatch centers. I'm going to touch on that briefly. We're going to review financial analysis that I completed that shows a 5-year projection on what the estimated cost is going to be if we don't make any changes to our dispatch center. We're going to do a 5-year projection using the same budget methodology for the outsource option, and then we're going to look at a couple of options to fine-tune our existing operation to see if there's a way we can maximize that revenue to make it more feasible to keep that. So we're going to run through a bunch of number crunching tonight. Those of you in the back are going to have a little trouble seeing some of the small print on the screen. Let me just say up front that the PowerPoint presentation is going to be online sometime tomorrow. You'll have access to all that. I have cards over on this table. If there's anything in that presentation you don't understand, please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call. My email is on there. Give me an email. My cell phone's on there. I prefer not to get cell phone calls, but call me in the office. If you absolutely have to have an answer right away, call that cell phone as well. My interest is getting answers to you in a timely fashion that hopefully that you can trust. Let's see, we're going to also try to examine service levels of a potential outsourced provider. And then we're going to talk about the status of the recommendation to the village board and what some of those next steps might be. I'm going to try to address the comments that we received to date, give you my best explanation or response to those questions, and then I believe the mayor is going to open this up for public comments and questions, and we'll be glad to try to answer additional questions that you might have tonight. I had a wonderful email from somebody in the community, I believe it was in the last couple of days, suggesting that if we don't have the answer, don't try to tap dance. That was a wonderful reminder to me. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer, that I have some more research to do, and we're going to be up here taking notes of what these questions are that we don't have answers for, and we're going to try to get an answer issued either through e-news or a link in e-news or some fashion that gets you to some document where we've got an answer for that. So that's our plan. Hopefully you find that will be accommodating, and away we go here. So before I go any further, I just want to reiterate everything up here on this screen is my analysis. I was directed by this board, by the mayor, to get this dispatch analysis completed and get this off the table, one way or another, whether we're going to move it forward or whether we're not. I started in November, second week in November. Matter of fact, 2 days before Stan and Dave did their financial presentation we're going to talk about in just a minute. It's been an interesting few months here, so I thought maybe somebody did chuckle on that. I told Trustee Starkey I felt like a Christian going in front of the lions at the Coliseum here, so we'll try to get through this. So, again, this is my analysis. This is not somebody else's agenda. This is trying to get to a logical conclusion of a question, a situation that's been posed to me, and this is my best effort to try to address that. This is not Chief Yost's analysis. This is not the mayor's analysis. This is my analysis. I have asked various members of staff to do some data collection for me. How I use that data is certainly up to me, and it's not been directed by me or to me by anybody. So, with that, what we hope to accomplish tonight is that we want to give you an in-depth update. First of all, an update to the mayor and to the village board and to staff, as well as the community on this analysis that we've completed to date, including the methodology that we've used. Phase 1 of this study, which is primarily complete, was a financial analysis of what we could potentially save in an outsourcing situation. Phase 2 is going to identify which vendor can maximize performance and savings while taking into consideration safety as our primary requirement for the community. I also hope to promote at least some level of understanding of the complexity of this issue, and while there may appear to be easy solutions, perhaps to increase revenue of the existing dispatch operation, that those may be a little bit more complex than what they may first appear. We want to provide you with some background on consolidation and outsourcing so that you don't think that we're doing something that hasn't been tried and proven effective elsewhere. There's lots of models that we can point to that shows how this is effective in other locations. We're not recreating the wheel here. And then finally, my overriding desire tonight is to improve communication with the public and make that a two-way communication rather than innuendo or implied fact or assumptions. I want us to have a discussion, a communication to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're proposing and what we're saying. I don't expect all of you to support my recommendation. But I hope that you'll at least understand my methodology and understand how I got to the conclusion that I got to. So, with that, I've got to operate this little doohickey here, so hopefully I won't mess that up here. So, first of all, the question is, why are we looking at consolidation or outsourcing as an alternative delivery method for 911 dispatching? We've gone through and done some financial analysis. We had our interim finance directors, Stan and Dave. Again, they were here doing their financial projections my second day. They put together some numbers. Again, I apologize for the size of these numbers. I thought the screen would be a little bit bigger here, but that's my first foray into this here. So this graph might be a little bit more descriptive of what we're trying to do here. So as you can see, this was a 3-year forecast with the current budget year, and in 3 out years, showing revenues in the black line and expenditures in the red line. The analysis that Stan and Dave put together shows that we are, I think they refer to it as being in the pink next year, with a actual deficit position fiscal year 16, and that gap widening as we get further and further into the situation, or into the budget. Before we get too much farther, Stan was the finance director in Carroll Stream for how many years? 25 years? He's very active in the Government Finance Officers Association and the Illinois Governmental Finance Officers Association. Very active in local government, municipal finance. He's currently working in another capacity for Hoffman Estates in municipal finance. Dave was with the village of Streamwood, is that correct? Correct. And 27 years finance director? 27 years. You got better tolerance and stamina than I have. Dave is also doing work for an insurance pool currently. So they're staying active in the municipal finance moving forward. I'm just telling you this to try to exhibit to you that these gentlemen have exquisite credentials. They know what they're talking about. They've done a nice job, in my opinion, trying to give us an accurate portrayal of the challenges that we're going to be facing moving forward. There's been comment, I think the mayor touched on at some point, that these two individuals were involved in cleaning up the mess in Dixon. I think that hit a spark with some people implying that, or the thought was that that implied that there was some criminal activity that they were checking into here. That is not the case. Their role with Dixon was to move that organization forward operationally after the criminal activity that had happened there with the treasurer. They had no role as criminal forensic accountant in that organization, and we did not ask them to do any of that for us. They were looking strictly at organizational procedures for a finance department moving forward, and that's, I believe, what we've accomplished with them. So, the assumptions used in their analysis, I'm going to cover those very quickly. Okay, let's go through those assumptions real quick. They covered police pension in their the actual reports, as well as what those projections might be on the police pension. That's a growing obligation on the village. That is a significant contributing factor to that widening of the revenues and the expenditures. It's difficult to keep up with that pension obligation, but those are included in the budget forecast. Health insurance. Health insurance requirements, I believe you included 10% increase each year for employees. We're finding that this renewal is going to be about 10%. So that target or that projection is right on target. Other general assumptions for expenditures, was that about 2%, Stan?
1.5%.
1.5% for the other expenditures. Fairly modest, fairly conservative projection moving forward. What this does not include is any kind of a systematic infrastructure improvement program or a capital improvement program that, in my opinion, this community sorely needs to address infrastructure maintenance and replacement with programmed revenues to do periodic replacement and maintenance on a scheduled basis rather than waiting for failure. Proactively addressing maintenance and replacement of infrastructure, in my opinion, is always better than waiting until failure. You're going to spend less money in the long run by doing that, my opinion. This projection also does not include any type of a programmed replacement of vehicles. The village has historically borrowed for the replacement of vehicles. Again, as we have other requirements that we're going to be needing to borrow money for, including Lake Michigan Water, as we borrow for everyday items and equipment, it takes away from our ability to borrow from other things. There's a debt limit in the state of Illinois, and every time we borrow for a vehicle, police car, public works truck, it takes a little bit more off that debt limit that complicates how we fund Lake Michigan Water. Now, this isn't a discussion about Lake Michigan Water, but we're making some progress on there. We're going to be coming back to you fairly quickly with some discussion of that as well. So, one thing that this does assume is that our state shared revenues, income tax, sales tax, those types of things from the state of Illinois, it assumes that those are going to remain constant, that we will continue to receive those at the same rate that we're receiving them, or at least the same percentage that they share with us. We are a little concerned, maybe a lot concerned, that the General Assembly and the Governor have some ideas about perhaps tapping into that for some of their own unfunded pension obligations. We have to keep our eye on that as well. If they take some of our revenues earmarked for our village, that gap between those lines is going to get wider quicker. So, Stan, have I done justice to your analysis with your assumptions and everything?
You covered most of them.
What else did I miss?
quickly, just a couple comments on the revenues, because we just pretty much addressed the large ones, but on the utility tax revenues, what you're seeing, and when I say what you're seeing, most municipalities are seeing this too, on the telecom tax, it's a steady decline. And the decline is in the 4 to 6% range on an annual basis. So the telecom companies have figured out how to beat the municipalities on that. So I'm sure service hasn't gone down, but that's going down. So that's a declining number. And the revenue off of NICOR is it probably went up this year due to the cold weather. But what we've been seeing is that becomes a very flat number too. So revenue growth is going to be very moderate, and over this 3-year span that we're looking at here, the expenditure growth outpaces the revenue growth. Again, I would say that that's not unique to Wauconda. That's what every municipality is going to be seeing, is that the revenue growth is going to level off, and given the fact that municipal operations are 70 to 80% labor, the expenditures are going to continue to outpace the revenues.
So I guess we could say thank you, Mr. Good News here. So Stan is going to be working with us a little bit over the next couple of weeks here, trying to get me caught up a little bit on budget preparation for the coming year, particularly in the water and sewer fund and some of the outlying funds. But we appreciate his expertise, and we're glad to have him around. So, Dave, did you have anything to add? Or? All right, thank you. So, we have a growing financial issue. I would be willing to bet that there's a lot of other municipalities out there with the same municipal issue that we have. One of the questions that we'll be addressing later is, somebody said last week, the sky is not falling, why are you doing this? I would agree with you that the sky is not falling, but we've got some challenges ahead, and we need to look at ways to save some money or to change the way that we provide services in a more effective, efficient manner. So, all right, let me get caught up on my notes here. I think it would be safe to say that we need to broaden and diversify our revenue sources. That would help. We're working in that regard on the Dominic site. Some of the other things with the TIF out on 176 Route 12, we're trying to promote some retail growth. That's going to help us broaden and diversify those revenues. We also need to evaluate the way that we provide services in all areas, not just dispatch services. Now, is that a foreshadowing of doom for police, for finance, for public works? No, it just means that we need to take a look at how we provide services and make sure that we're doing it as cost effectively as we can and still meet the service needs of this community. So that's our challenge and our goal. So why is dispatch our target at the moment? Sourcing out dispatch is not going to be the cure-all for our community, at least for this organization. We're going to need to continue examining other sources. What's happened with dispatch is that there are trends happening in the industry right now that we'll go through in just a moment. There are models in place of how this outsourcing is working and some other models that are working effectively, and some other communities are experiencing some significant savings. It's an option for us. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the savior of everything that we need to do. We need to continue our work and try to make this a manageable budget process moving forward. So with that, I'm going to move into the next area here. We'll talk about a timeline on this evaluation. Spring of 2013, I've heard several people, including on the board, make comments that said that the business model for Wauconda Dispatch was shared with them and it's not working. And they were referring to financially. Chief Larson, police chief at that time, had begun assembling data on consolidation and outsourcing options. The exact start time that he started assembling that data, I don't have any idea. April 2013's municipal election. May of 2013, Mayor Bart meets with Chief Larson, encourages him to continue exploring cost-saving options. Summer 2013, you guys were busy this summer. Personnel changes, police chief, village administrator, finance director. Early fall, I guess that spilled over too in some cases. August 2013, we're going to be talking about this ETSB, this Emergency Telephone Safety Board study. Releases their study on opportunities for 911 consolidation. That report is released. That group, ETSB, is chaired by our own fire chief, Chief Dato. He's been a valuable resource for me on this analysis, and if I have a technical issue, I typically go to him for at least some direction on where to find the answers. September of 2013, we have our interim finance directors take a look at Chief Larson's analysis. Just a quick precursory overlook of that confirms that there are opportunities for savings through outsourcing. They make no assessment of quality, they make no recommendations other than recognizing that there are significant opportunities for savings through outsourcing. November 2013, that's when I came into the picture. One of the first meetings we had was a talk about outstanding projects. That was a meeting with the board and the mayor. There was a list of projects for me to address. Lake Michigan Water was number one. Number two was get this dispatching study completed and get it off the table so that at least the dispatchers can have some peace of mind of where this is going. So February 14th of 2014, I met with the dispatchers to talk about the financial analysis that had been conducted on the feasibility of outsourcing. We shared with them that the completion of phase one showed that there were significant opportunities for savings, and that my preliminary recommendation to the board, based strictly on the financial factors, is that there's some opportunities there and we need to pursue that further. That was before we had looked at anything regarding safety, performance, quality of services. We've gone into some of that since then. We have a little bit of work left to do. 25th, tonight, committee of the whole, we're going to run through that financial analysis, and we're going to give you, the board and the audience, an update on that phase two analysis, looking at issues such as safety, performance, and quality of services. Some terminology that that I may use tonight. I'm getting a little bit more versed in this, but not a significant amount. I don't want you to be confused if I use one of these acronyms tonight. PSAP simply stands for Public Safety Answering Point. That's a dispatch operation of some sort. CAD, Computer-Aided Dispatch. In Chris's world, that's Computer-Aided Design. Dispatch is Computer-Aided Dispatch. ETSB, Emergency Telephone Safety Board. CALEA is a Committee on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. Those are all going to be mentioned later in the report. So I just want to make sure we weren't lost in acronyms here, and I can get carried away on some of that stuff on occasion. So, this is the cover page of the ETSB report, the Lake County ETSB report, which Fire Chief Dale is the chair of, and it talks about operational options for communication centers, and it talks about consolidation and different forms of consolidation and financial opportunities, as well as potential for gaining in performance through consolidation. It was a an enlightening read for me, although it was a little dry. I have to read it a few times. I think the board has a copy of that in front of you. I believe we've given a copy to at least portions of the staff here. We use that extensively in this evaluation. So, significant findings of the ETSB study identified that there's currently 19 dispatch centers in Lake County. While they didn't quantify what that number was even 5 years ago, I'm pretty confident that that number was significantly higher than 19. There's been several consolidations of different models of alternative service provision that have taken place. So right at the time of that study, there was 19. So what they've done is they've gone through discussed the various functions of the PSAP, that public safety answering point, which call receiving, fire and EMS dispatch, and law enforcement dispatch. They talked about those task-specific roles and how a consolidation or a joining of resources can provide opportunities that represent the greatest potential reduction in savings in a consolidated environment. So we're going to go into that just a little bit. So the areas within a PSAP that affect cost and performance. If you have a consolidated center, usually you have a few more employees than you would have in a locally operated one. You have some opportunities for some performance improvements through administrative support. That's either management, supervision, administrative support, be it technology, what have you. A lot of words on this slide, probably too many. You have to remember, when I was in school, PowerPoint wasn't around yet, so they didn't teach us how to do this stuff yet. So I'm learning on the fly here. Second area, technology and technical support. This refers to the cost of the acquisition and maintenance of the technology that they use, as well as the staff value in keeping that equipment and technology performing optimally. You'll see various levels of technical support and technology available in different PSAPs, different emergency dispatch centers. So there's some opportunities for gain in performance and cost savings there. Third area, policies and procedures. Some of these are very formal, some of these are informal. The more formal, their conclusion, the more formal, the better opportunity for oversight, keeping employees accountable to those performance standards. So they identify policies and procedures and the effort put into developing and administering those policies and procedures as a significant potential benefit in performance, as well as a potential cost savings through those policies and procedures. And then finally, they identify training as being an area with extremely wide variation, from the most professional organizations that formalize standardized training to others that are less formalized, less standardized. Maybe it's informally done, it's word of mouth from employee to employee. Some of the things that we're seeing in some of our operations. From a county-wide view, again, they have 19 PSAPs in Lake County. They estimated that there's 281 full-time equivalent employees working in these PSAPs. The estimated cost for that total service in Lake County is $33 million. They looked at options of combining all of those PSAPs into the most aggressive approach, which was 2 dispatch operations. They looked at 4 dispatch operations, and they looked at 7 dispatch operations. If they consolidated into 7 operations, it would provide an opportunity to reduce personnel to an estimated 233 full-time equivalents. And it would reduce total operational spending to $31 million annually, savings of $2 million a year. You'd think it'd be a little bit more than that. for the number of PSAPs you'd be consolidating them. If you go into 4 centers, you've got an opportunity to reduce personnel to an estimated 216 full-time equivalents. And again, you're doing that because you can gain efficiencies through conglomeration of staffs. The last bullet point, you can reduce your total operational spending to an estimated $29 million annually, which is to be savings of $4 million annually. The most aggressive option was to consolidate into 2 centers. I don't know where the trend is headed. I know it's towards consolidation. I don't know where it's going to stop. Some in the industry will say it's going to be 2 centers in a suburban dispatch environment like this. Somebody told me yesterday, I believe it was, there are some states that are mandating only 1 emergency communication center per county. I'm trying to verify that, but again, this information has been shared with me. So, again, the most aggressive option, consolidation into 2 centers. Provides an opportunity to reduce personnel to an estimated 186 full-time equivalents, and you reduce total operational spending to $24 million annually, which is a $9 million savings on an annual basis for the taxpayers in the county. Now, why do I bring up consolidation from this report on a county-wide basis? So why do I do that? Really, the purpose for doing that is just to show you that people much smarter than I am that specialize in this area are recognizing the potential benefits and the cost savings with consolidation through different models. And it's a legitimate option, in their opinion, for service levels in a county such as Lake County, where we operate. Let's see here, I lost my place on my script here. Let's see. So not only did they look at the financial benefit of consolidation, but they also looked at other things that could improve performance. ETSB study talked about dispatch performance and prioritization of calls, consistency in performance, improvement in employee oversight. Typically, those oversight is lacking in communities or dispatch centers that may have some budgetary constraints, may have some lack of supervisory staff dedicated to dispatch. Supervisory responsibilities may be in multiple areas. You may have a chief or a deputy chief or a sergeant. We all know that their attention is going to be fragmented because they have hundreds of other things that they're responsible for. Industry best practices, we identify those. They indicate performance expectations in emergency communication centers should be established and measured quarterly, if not monthly. These are all going to be relevant when I'm going through and evaluating a potential outsource vendor, which is why I'm going through this now. Finally, item D, quality assurance processes recommended to ensure that performance expectations are met. And those are standardized, regular, either through technology, through your supervisors, making sure you're following the policies, procedures, the protocols, making sure you're very consistent in how you're handling emergency response calls. There's some benefits to be gained from that. The emphasis on this, the underlining here, is my emphasis. It was not included in the report like that. It just talks about smaller centers often do not have defined performance expectations or processes to measure performance. You can also experience enhanced response time and increased efficiency through consolidation, according to the report. You can get more consistent prioritization of calls to the radio. You can also get an enhanced dispatch process through task specializations. You may have one person taking calls. You may have another group doing emergency medical dispatch. You may have another do some other type of dispatching work. So there might be some opportunities for specialization there. The last two items that they identified, or at least the ones that I recognized in this, reduced stress levels for dispatchers, better ability to handle activity surges, personal needs, breaks, time off requests, those types of things that may not be available in a smaller operation. Increased flexibility for staffing, better meets the needs of the community. If you have a consolidated staff that may be a little bit larger. Their concluding comments. While a complex issue, which would be news to nobody here, there are many variables to consider. The bottom line is that entities within Lake County and ultimately their taxpayers could potentially save a significant amount on operations and capital expenditures related to PSAP and dispatch operations with the added benefit of enhancing service. This is not my assessment. This is a report written by experts commissioned by Lake County ETSB. Let's just run through some quick models that have been available out in this general area, in the metro area, what we might see from some of those or learn from some of those. Something I'm fairly familiar with, CCOM in McHenry County, that was a joint effort of Crystal Lake, Algonquin, and Cary. They came together in a consortium and created an independent board overseeing a separate independent dispatch operation that happens to be housed in the basement of the Crystal Lake Village Hall. But that's an independent operation. They have their own budget. They're self-funded through revenues. There is no entity, there is no municipality that is underwriting that other than members participating in that. This is a little closer to home in Lake County. This is an outsourcing model. Libertyville moved their dispatch service to Vernon Hills. The quote in the paper was, the move was fueled by cost savings. Will save more than $1.2 million in operating and other costs during the 5-year term. That was an article that appeared in the Daily Herald. Russell, if you can give me props for recognizing your paper, that'd be great. Antioch is another example of the Lake County outsourcing model. Again, they're talking about budgetary shortfalls from losses to nearby dispatching agencies make closing the center necessary. These are quotes, I believe that was from the police chief. Antioch costs about $750,000 annually to operate, offset by only $180,000 in revenue from Lindenhurst and Antioch Fire. This move will save the village $200,000 annually. They had another report elsewhere that said that was going to save them $240,000 annually. That was done in 2012. Decision to outsource came after an exhaustive research process, including the chief's efforts to seek out more customers after losing a contract last year with the Lakeville Police Department to Fox Lake E911 Communications Center. The loss of the revenue made Antioch Center not only unprofitable, but unsustainable when other dispatch centers have excess capacity to serve more customers and lower fee structures. This is where they said it was going to save them about $240,000 annually after they discount those first year startup costs. Sorry, Russell, this is Lake County News. So. This one, I'm not a big fan of this one in particular, but this is an example of Oak Lawn. I believe it's in Cook County. November of 2013, they initiated a termination of their existing employees, and they hired a firm called Norcom to come in and operate their equipment in their existing dispatch center. I believe Norcom attempted to hire the displaced workers in at a lower wage to operate the equipment they had been operating on before. According to Wauconda Village Manager Larry, however you pronounce that name, it saved the village $1 million over 2 years. I know they're in the process of that. There's been unfair labor practices filed for that. There's been a number of different things going on. I believe they're moving forward with that. So those are some of the recent trends in the industry that we're aware of. We know Lamont has announced that they're looking at outsourcing. That was a December of 2013 article. I know of at least 2 other operations in Lake County that I have talked with that are considering outsourcing their operations to other locations. And really, again, the purpose for sharing this for you is repeating what the ETSB study said. This is not groundbreaking. This is not reinventing the wheel. These are established models that have been effective and they have been in place operating for a number of years. So, where does that leave us? Our phase 1 analysis, it's really the financial component of this that tries to identify what we would be saving in a potential outsourcing situation. I was hoping that print would be bigger. It's not. What you can see, or maybe what you can't see, again, this will be online tomorrow on the village's website, and feel free to pull that up and call me if you have any questions. This column here, it says approved budget 2013-14. I had to consolidate the line items into categories to be able to fit it into this format. The revenues in the approved budget for 2013-14, $281,350. We break down our expenditures into personnel, it's almost $900,000. Contractual, $22,000. Supplies, $11,747. Have some other expenditures in here, I'm not sure exactly what that is. Capital debt, that's where we're paying off the radio and furniture equipment, or not, the dispatch equipment, not the radio equipment. That's $30,908. And then the total expenditures, $955,238. If you track the total, take the total expenditures and subtract the revenues, you've got a net cost to the village of Wauconda of $673,888. The revenues in this come from our current arrangements with other municipalities and with the Fire Protection District. We dispatch for Tower Lakes, for Lakemore, as well as Wauconda Fire Protection District. If we take those numbers and we extrapolate those forward at a 3% adjustment each year, just based on our current customers, no other assumptions included in there, you come up with these numbers running across the top. In 2018-19, total revenue for this operation, as it currently operates, is going to be projected to be about $310,237. Total expenditures for that same period of time is over $1 million. It's $1,089,000. Net cost in 2018 and 19 is projected to be $779,000 for that operation. So we've done the same analysis here, moving forward for an outsourcing option, which happens to be Lake Zurich, who, through our initial assessment, appeared to be the lowest cost, as well as providing the most professional service of our, or the most competitive professional service in our outsourcing options. Again, the 13-14 column, that's our approved budget, so that's not going to include any outsourcing costs in there. Our assumptions moving forward in 2014-15 is if the board were to decide to accept this proposal and move this forward, we would have an addition in contractual of whatever our service fees would be billed to us by Lake Zurich. We would have 2 months continuing to operate our existing dispatch center in May and June with a cutover in July. You'd see all these other expenditures drop out. You would see the dispatch fees continue to move forward. We have taken, because Lake Zurich is giving us an estimate based on call volume or on a cost per call basis, we looked at our history of calls for the past 5 years. We happened to find that the call volume was dropping during that 5-year period, which seems to be somewhat of an anomaly in the industry. So not to skew the analysis, we took an average of those 5 years, and then we adjusted that call volume forward 3% each year. So that's how and then we take those calls and apply it to the rates provided by Lake Zurich to do that. There are a couple of other assumptions in here in this analysis. We would have 2 months of revenues from our existing clients, as well as 2 months of revenues from the telephone bills. We get approximately $100,000 from telephone bills now from the ETSB. Other assumptions, let's see, if we outsourced to Lake Zurich, we would pay off capital costs, so you see a big number there, and we would pay that off in 14-15. Also included in contractual are some fees for some additional costs that we would incur because we wouldn't have dispatchers in the building anymore. We would need to transport any detainees from our facility at the end of the day to Lake County. That's a 20-mile trip each way. So we've tried to include a cost in there for that 40-mile trip for 100 trips back and forth to the county. We would typically try to use a patrol officer on duty to be able to do that, or on his regular shift to be able to transport those detainees. We know there's going to be situations where we can't afford to have an officer pulled from a shift for this type of duty. We have budgeted for half of those trips to the county to be paid through overtime to a sworn officer to do that. There is no severance included in this analysis. That if the board wants to move forward on this proposal, that would have to be an impact that would have to be bargained with the union, and we would certainly welcome that opportunity if it came to that. Let's see, there's also a generator issue and a UPS, an unprotected, uninterrupted power supply unit that in case of power failure kicks in and keeps everything running for the 911 dispatch center. Initially in our analysis, we thought that because those were provided by the ETSB, if we stopped doing dispatch, they would want that equipment removed or removed from their umbrella, perhaps sell it to us, go through auction, what have you. In speaking with Chief Dado, we've come up with a solution or an alternative proposal that we think has some merit for this community, and that would be to keep our dispatch equipment in place as an idle backup. And there's some benefits of doing that. Number one, it gives us an excellent facility for training purposes, for future dispatchers or for Lake Zurich to bring people over and train them on a live system if need be. We've also got an opportunity for local incident or event management out of our operations center or for our dispatch center. Let's see, there's one other one. And we'd also have another layer of a safety net that if something catastrophic happened to our initial provider of service, We could walk in our dispatch center, flip the switch, and we'd be back in business on an operational basis, assuming we had employees that we could put behind those screens and take those calls. If something happened, a natural disaster took out the dispatch center at Lake Zurich, under this scenario, we could bring employees, plug them in behind these screens until that situation could get rectified in another manner. So we've tried to incorporate as many of those assumptions into the analysis as possible through a outsourcing arrangement with Lake Zurich, which happened to be the most favorable from an economic standpoint. You can see the projected budget in 14-15, the net cost $770,000, $777,515. And that includes the $413 for the payoff of the loan. And moving that forward over the next few years, it goes from $288,000 up to about $343,000 during that period of time. That's our net cost projected under this scenario with Lake Zurich. So this is a comparison, this is a comparison of the options. Again, 5-year budget projection, operating and capital. Status quo projected net cost. This is the outsourcing projected net cost starting in 2014-15. That first year we show a negative number there because we're paying off that loan equipment. Starting in the second year, potential savings jumps up to almost $462,000. Under the 16-17 budget, the status quo budget includes a balloon payment on that equipment that we had sped up under the outsourcing proposal by a couple of years. Potential savings in that year alone is nearly $800,000. $435,000 in 17-18, $437,000 in 18-19. Total 5-year projected savings, a little over $2 million. I mean, that's a pretty significant chunk of change for a community this size. I think we could make a pretty significant dent into some kind of a capital improvements plan or a structured programming of capital improvements with that kind of money. That is not to say that there's not a negative associated with this, particularly for our employees. It gives us some flexibility on some other areas. So we've had, let me just say this here, this was operating and capital. Sometimes that capital can get a little bit confusing when you plug that in. So let's take that capital out. Let's look at operating costs only. Potential savings each year, starting at $335,000, 14-15. Again, that's only for 10 months. Then it goes from $430,725 up to $436,893 total, exclusive of capital savings. Again, over $2 million. So that's only two options. That's the status quo, and that's outsourcing. We received a lot of criticism for not looking at attracting new call volume, new clients to our existing revenue center, so we've tried to do just that. We've tried to take a look at adding call volume to our current operating model, but you have to realize that adding clients and call volume, only works up until the point where you start needing to add personnel. And that negates those savings, really gets you back in the same situation. So the optimal situation would be to maximize the revenue without having to add personnel. Where that number is remains to be determined. So this is what I'm calling the tweaking scenario, and that's not to be confused with twerking, because I don't know what that is, but my kids would make fun of me if I put that up there. Tweaking scenario. We would add small clients We would add up to 5,000 additional dispatch calls, which represents about an 18% increase in volume. We could anticipate additional revenue of about $80,000, and that's based on market rates. And then we would also make the assumption that our current workforce could handle that additional call volume without additional hires. Again, that remains to be seen. I don't know if that's the case. We would have to do an analysis on that. You'd have to take a look at what kind of calls are being added to that volume. An emergency medical call versus a fire call versus a law enforcement call. Those are all different levels of resources that you need for those types of calls. At least so I'm told. Also, under this tweaking scenario, we could take a look at renewing our expiring contracts with Tower Lakes and Lakemore at market rates. There was an effort to attract them to our services at one point. What we were charging them may have been, appears to be significantly below what the market value would currently suggest. By doing that, I'm not suggesting that they would re-up with us. It would be a negotiation process that we would have to sit down and we'd have to work out some things. You could save, or you could generate an additional $50,000 through that. So basically, you're looking at $80,000, $50,000. You plug that into the model. Same circumstances that we just went through. Potential savings of outsourcing. Overall, that number is still $1.4 million, even with adding $5,000 in additional call volume into the current equation. Is that a definitive analysis? No. Could we do another 10,000 calls? Maybe. It would have to be a situation where we'd have to sit down and analyze how busy our control points are and when we would need to open that additional control point. So we looked at the tweaking of our operation. Let's talk about a significant expansion of call volume. If we added 15,000 calls annually, it's a 54% increase in calls. That's based on the numbers that we handled in 2013. That revenue would be projected based on market rates at $236,000. What's the impact on staffing if we add 15,000 calls? If we add a full-time dispatch point, the ETSD study tells us that number is about 5.5 personnel to fully staff one control point. If we tried to get creative here and we did a flex coverage with 3 additional dispatchers on the peak times of day that we can reasonably predict, we can reduce that down to 3 dispatchers, and we reduce the cost from $425,000 just for salary and benefits on a mid-level dispatcher to $255,000 on a mid-level dispatcher for 3 dispatchers. So let's plug that $255,000 in and let's see what happens there. So we've done all that. 3 positions added to provide flex coverage for additional answering dispatching points. Those 3 positions now have driven this 5-year projected savings back up to over $1.9 million compared to the outsourcing option. So somewhere in between adding those 3 positions that we're assuming that we would need to add for 15,000 additional calls, that's nearly offsetting all that additional revenue that we're generating. So again, the key to this, where did that go? The optimal situation is to maximize revenue without having to add personnel. So we'd have to find out where that best performance location is on the calls that we could add without having to add dispatch, and then compare it to what our savings would be through the outsourcing model. We've got some other challenges to add call volume. We've done some calling, we've done some checking, we've had Wauconda Police Department staff call around to approximately 40 entities. Lake County, McHenry County, I think there was Keene County in one instance, or maybe a couple instances. There may have been some in some other counties as well. But we called 40 entities to try to have a discussion to see if there was any interest in moving forward. We got no commitments in that discussion. We got what I'm calling tire kickers from 3 small communities. They're interested in hearing what the savings would be, what the rate would be, but we don't know if there's any real interest on their part in coming. So we could assume those 3 small communities that we're talking to, that we have talked to, probably around $5,000 calls added to our dispatch operations, which gets back into the tweaking scenario that we just walked through. After all that, a lot of numbers, a lot of talking, what's our conclusion on the financial part of this? Again, our conclusion is that based on the research that we've done, we could save a projected $2.1 million when compared to the current practice. Call volume expansion alone will not come close to matching the savings of outsourcing. That's, I think we can display that, we can show that. There might be a call volume that would provide savings that would reduce that gap. I don't think it would come close to eliminating that. So my conclusion from phase 1 is if we can get all of our other performance and safety questions answered, and we're confident that we can get performance provided to us at our existing level, that we should pursue outsourcing with an entity like Lake Zurich. That's not the answer you wanted to hear, I know. When we get into the phase 2 part of this, how do we evaluate quality of service for a potential dispatching operation? There's 4 ways that we have looked at in using this. Those standards that we talked about, those opportunities identified in the ETSB report, we compare those best practice scenarios to what we're doing now and what Lake Zurich is doing. And we try to get an assessment of how we compare, what performance benefits might be gained by doing something of that nature, outsourcing. We've used an independent evaluation and accreditation firm. That's the CLIA reference that we had earlier. That would to document the development and implementation of policies and procedures, as well as adherence to these policies and procedures through systematic processes. Item 3, we've used testimonials from current clients and other informed observers to try to assess the overall reputation. We've also used our own experience. Lake Zurich has served as a backup to us on occasion. They're our backup now. They've had to utilize our services on occasion. And we have used our own assessment of their services for determination there. Okay, this part, I want to be perfectly clear before we get into this. What I'm suggesting when I'm talking about these best practices that have been identified in ETSB moving forward is not meant to be a critique of our own employees providing dispatch services. It's not meant to be a critique of supervisors over our dispatching services. It is going to be a fairly stark criticism of the village of Wauconda as a whole in not committing the types of resources that we would need to provide adequate supervision and administrative support for that operation. So So I just want to make that sure, make that clear. The critiques that I have up here of our operation are not our employees, they're not our supervisors. It's more of a critique of the overall organizational commitment to supervision and administrative oversight of that operation. I'm still going to get hung on that, I know I am. So the ETSB study, administrative support. If we run through and we look at Lake Zurich, their operation, they've got a 20-year supervisor dedicated exclusively to the E911 center. They also have an assistant supervisor. My assessment, these resources contribute to a high level of performance and consistency through systematic review of policies, procedures, implementation of those, training, quality assurance practices for those employees. For the Village of Wauconda, we get a lot done without a lot of supervisory resources assigned to this. It's assigned to a sergeant currently, or a mix of sergeants, if I'm not mistaken. Those sergeants have other duties. This is a small part of their everyday duty. Sometimes the adherence to policies and procedures in our organization may be less formalized because of that than it might be in Lake Zurich. Technology and technological support. I'm a little bit envious of Lake Zurich and their technology department. They've got a director of technology and his staff. He's very well versed in 911 communications. Talking to him just blows me out of the water because I don't understand half of what he's saying most of the time, but he's a highly intelligent guy. Lake Zurich, technologically, they're comparable to Wauconda with similar equipment. As a matter of fact, we're operating on many of the same networks. The radio frequency standard that many people have brought up that's going to be due in 2021, that needs addressing. Lake Zurich recognizes that. We recognize that Lake Zurich needs to address that. Otherwise, Lake Zurich is strong in technological support provided by their technology department. Wauconda, our operation, our technology is excellent. We're well positioned to meet radio frequency needs in 2021. Technological support is handled through outside vendors or contractors, or, and this is a plus on our employees' part, is that they voluntarily take on added responsibility to make sure that those technological functions are addressed. It's certainly self-initiative to get some of those things done. Formal policies and procedures. Lake Zurich, we'll talk about this in a minute when we talk about Kalia. Lake Zurich has expended a considerable amount of time and effort into their policies and procedures and in making sure that they have educated their employees on those policies and procedures and making sure that they're using and implementing those. They get graded by Kalia on that, and we'll get into that in just a minute. We have developed policies and procedures. These policies and procedures are effective, but we may not as consistently implement those policies and procedures. And again, through lack of supervisory oversight, we don't have any, at least to my knowledge, we don't have a regular systematic incident review that proper supervisory functioning would allow us to address. ETSB study says that performance standards and expectations should be formally set, those expectations communicated as an industry best standard. Lake Zurich has a rigorous commitment to that. They have a vested interest in maintaining their Kalia accreditation. We, on the other hand, we don't have any accreditation. Doesn't mean we can't provide effective service. Just means that we maybe have less of a formal commitment to making sure that those standards and expectations are met. Measured performance, quality assurance, quality control. It's a systematic review of how calls are handled, how calls are dispatched, to make sure that those policies and procedures are implemented according to what has been developed and put in place. Lake Zurich, systematic quality control and quality assurance. They do regular review with employees to make sure that those policies and procedures are being followed. I'm not aware that we have a systematic quality control and assurance in our operation. Again, does that mean it's bad? No. But we're less confident that it's following our policies and procedures than it would be if we had consistent supervisory practices. Training practices. Formalized standard training. Less consistent practices due to fewer organizational resources committed to this function in our own dispatch center. Again, this is my assessment after talking with a number of different people, interviewing the chief, other people associated with the dispatch, talking with Dave Dado, Chief Dado, talking with as many people as I possibly can to gain feedback. CALEA, you've heard me mention that several times. That's an accreditation body that's fairly rigorous. Sometimes that can take you up to 3 years to get your act together, to get your accreditation standard. You usually have an employee dedicated strictly to development of policies that would comply with CALEA certification and meet the review requirements of CALEA. Just a little bit of information about CALEA. We try to maintain a credible and best-in-class body of standards developed by a highly regarded group of public safety practitioners, establishing and administering an accreditation process. There's information at the bottom on the website for CALEA if you have any interest in seeing any more information about what they're all about. Their goals are to formalize essential management procedures and improve service delivery. Dispatch operations under the organizational umbrella of the police department are included in the CALEA assessment process and plays a significant role in determining success in the pursuit of CALEA certification. So what does that tell us when we're talking about CALEA? It just means that they formalized their efforts to be as professional as they possibly can. Does that mean that they provide a better level of service than us? Not necessarily. It just means that they're expending more effort in the supervisory practices than what we are. Another source, testimonials. We've talked with current clients of Lake Zurich, Hawthorne Woods, Lake Zurich Fire. Talked with Chief Dado to get his impression on what their services are like. We've talked to, again, as many people as we possibly can to try to get a feel for what their performance levels are like. We also evaluate what happens when we have used them as our backup. In November of 2013, we had a system failure due to a power outage. Our backup did not kick in like it should because we had kind of an unusual situation on the power failure. Everything was kicked over to Lake Zurich. We had seamless cutover and uninterrupted dispatching of public safety employees. Excuse me for this moment here. There's also something called spillover calls. If you call our dispatch center right now, if the phone rings 4 times at Wauconda dispatch and it doesn't get answered, I'm told on the 5th ring it rings at the Lake Zurich dispatch for 911. Good clarification, for 911. Any estimate on how frequently that occurs? Be daily, weekly, monthly? Depends on just depends on how busy our dispatch might be or if there's other extenuating circumstances. Our overall internal assessment, when we've had to use their services, we've had an excellent history with them, providing professional dispatch operations for our organization. So basically, using those 4 evaluation methods, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that we could confidently conclude that the operational performance of Lake Zurich's Emergency Communications Center will meet Wauconda's current level of service. I'm not going to say it's going to exceed it. I'm going to say that we can expect it to meet our current level of service. Technological capacity and capabilities. Any conclusions that we can gain from that? Preliminary assessment of Lake Zurich's technology is positive. We do have some issues. We have to work through the 2021 radio frequency. We don't have any answers on that yet. According to, we'll get into that in a few minutes, but to move forward on assessing their capabilities and their capacity to handle our calls, we're going to continue to work through a implementation strategy to try to identify any other outstanding technology issues that we may have missed. When we get through with that, we'll have a final assessment for the board. I'm sure you'll all be back to hear what that might be. So next steps and timing. We want to finish that potential implementation plan. We're giving a timeline on that of about 2 weeks. Hopefully we can get that done within 2 weeks. We want to work with Lake Zurich and Wauconda Fire to make sure that Wauconda Police Department and Wauconda Fire Protection District can be dispatched from the same location. We think that's a critical service level that we need to keep. We're given 3 weeks to work through those issues with the various parties. We also need to work on an intergovernmental agreement on a draft of that if the board chooses to move this forward for a discussion, they're going to want to know what those terms and conditions are in that draft. We've had 1 meeting with Lake Zurich's administration to talk through conceptually what those issues might be. We don't have anything on paper as of yet. We have no agreements in place. We've still got some work to do there, about 3 weeks. Step 4, we need to incorporate the outsourcing of Wauconda's E911 as an option into the overall budget discussion to show this group of people over here, the village board, what our broader plan is on village finances. Trustee Barbini had requested that. We've had several other trustees say that's essential that they have that information before they make any evaluations or assessments of this proposal. If we successfully address the remaining outstanding issues, item 1 and 2, we can get that draft IGA to the board for consideration probably about 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Step 6, we have some unfinished business with collective bargaining with this group. If outsourcing is pursued, we need to conclude bargaining for the 13-14 contract year. We need to schedule those meetings with the union. We also need to talk about impact bargaining when shutting down that center if that's the option that the board chooses to go with. If outsourcing is rejected, we need to schedule collective bargaining for the 13-14 contract year and beyond. That's our sixth step. So we need to get those scheduled. Now we get into the fun part, the questions that you had proposed. So give me just a second here. I'm going to take off my coat, get a drink of water, and I'll be back right with you.